What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another live stream real estate recap where we talk about everything to do with the housing market and some other stuff. Got another great live stream for you tonight. First one of 2025. Took December off, but we're back. I got a great guest. I'm going to bring him on in a second. If you are watching this on the replay, consider joining us live. You can ask me questions. You can ask my guest questions, engage in the conversation. It's a lot of fun and it makes it a lot more fun for us. So 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday. Come join us live. I would love to have you. Before I bring my guest on, I did want to just say something about what's happening in California. It's just gotten really bad there with the fires. I do have some personal friends who are displaced. I hope that everyone who needs to be evacuated has been evacuated and are safe. I know it's easy for me to say, but I have to say something because I'm just thinking about them. And I really hope they get these fires under control soon. That is my hope. Okay, before I bring my guest on, let me tell you a little bit about him. I've been trying to get him on for a while, so I finally got him. His name is Steve Withrow. I met him when I first moved back to Maryland from California 19 years ago. We were in the same office. And now, 19 years later, he's actually the manager of the office I work in at Compass. So while I have knowledge of all my transactions, what's happening in the housing market pertaining to what I do, he has knowledge on hundreds of agents and what they're doing. So really knows what's happening in the housing market, especially here in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, but really all over the country because Compass is a national company. So a great source of knowledge for the housing market. So let me bring him on.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Steve. Hi, how are you?
I'm hanging in there, trying to stay warm.
I know it's cold out. It's really cold out. I was out
I'm
today at
ready
a
for
listing
spring.
appointment and I almost froze. But I kind of like it. I'm not going to lie. I kind of like the cold. Thank you for coming on. I've been trying to get you for a while, as you know, so I really
My
appreciate
pleasure. I'm
you
having fun and made
joining
it
me.
work.
Yeah, so I have this article. I'm going to pull it up on realtor.com. I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to show you. They're talking about a glimmer of hope in the housing market. I know we talk about the housing market all the time. So let me bring this up. All right. Can you see that okay?
I sure can.
Okay. So this was just written January 6th. Why does it seem to be a little bit off center? All right, it's fine. Well, homeowners finally sell in 2025. Here's what the experts say amid a glimmer of hope. Let's see what the hope is. The U.S. housing market crawled to a standstill last year, and while the latest projections show that 2025 is expected to bring only limited relief to buyers and sellers, there is a glimmer of hope on the horizon. The year closed out with the strongest seasonal slump since January 2023. So far, not so much hope. Homes lingered on the market for a whopping 70 days, up from 62 in November. It made December 2024 the slowest festive season in 5 years. Inventory also plummeted 8.6% from November, making the most precipitous drop in nearly 2 years. Meanwhile, mortgage rates reached a 6-month high, hitting 6.91% for the average 30-year fixed home loan for the week ending January 2nd, according to the latest numbers from Freddie Mac. On top of that, in mid-December, the Federal Reserve announced a plan for fewer than anticipated rate cuts in 2025, which was expected to have a chilling effect on the already catatonic market. The Realtor.com economic research team projects that mortgage rates will average 6.3% through 2025 and end 2024 at around 6.2%, dashing any hopes for a return to the COVID-19 pandemic era below 3% rate. So far, not so good. Let's just keep going a little bit more. The lock-in effect still grips homeowners. The projected above 6% mortgage rate for the duration of 2025 is bad news, not only for didn't it say glimmer of hope? Was that in the title?
I'm waiting for the glimmer.
Okay, hopefully we'll get there. The projected above 6% mortgage rate for the duration of 2025 is bad news, not only for prospective buyers, but also for would-be sellers who have spent the past year in the grips of the lock-in effect, which has made them unwilling to list their properties in part with their current significantly lower mortgage rates. A report from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau released back in September revealed that about 60% of the 50.8 million active mortgages had interest rates below 4%. I'm in that number, way lower than the December rate of 6.91%. Homeowners fortunate enough to be paying off their mortgage at the below 4% rate would think twice before moving to sell their home and then be forced to take out a new mortgage at a much higher rate. We expect the willingness of homeowners to sell their existing home and buy a new one to wane. says Realtor.com chief economist Danielle Hale. Put simply, potential home sellers and the market in general will still feel the effects of mortgage rate lock-in, which is more acute when rates are higher. But there are glimmers of hope on the horizon. Okay, Realtor.com, what are the glimmers of hope? Hale says that while the first months of 2025 will see only a small increase in home stock, at least in part because the lock-in effect's persistent hold on homeowners, come spring, the inventory levels are projected to climb even above the typical seasonal boost. Interesting. She also projects that they will remain high throughout most of the summer. Time will continue to be an important healer of mortgage rate lock, with only modest help from lower rates expected in 2025, Hale explains. Even in today's tough housing market, life happens and some households move, buying and selling whatever conditions the market offers. Okay, and this article goes on and on, but I want to stop there for a second because I know that Robert Refkin, always says that there are reasons that people move besides mortgage rates. He calls them the 5Ds,
The
right?
5 Ds.
So what are the 5Ds again? Because I always
Death,
forget.
divorce, diapers, diplomas, and what is the 5th D?
Death, divorce, diapers, diplomas, relocation, but that's not a D.
Nah, there's another D. It'll come to us as we're talking.
Job change?
Nah, job change, right? Yeah.
Because that's another one for jobs. What would that be with the D?
Mhm.
I don't know.
I don't know. It'll come to us.
And that is true. I mean, obviously, people always have to sell and buy for those reasons. People are upsizing, they're downsizing for whether they're having a baby or a divorce or an estate, or what I think is a big one is relocation for work. That being said, have you seen like downsize? We said downsize. Thank you. Slipping Jimmy said downsize. You said that, right? Downsize. Death, divorce, diploma, downsize. That's not even jobs.
Yeah, it's not that. We'll think of it, Jimmy. But thanks for trying to help.
Have you seen? Let's start with the last quarter of 2024, because, like I was telling everyone before you came on, you see a lot more than I do.
Mhm.
You see hundreds of agents' transactions.
Mhm.
I'm going to just get rid of this article for a second. I'll bring it back up. You see hundreds of articles, transactions, where I just see my own. So I kind of know what's happening with myself, and also I'm part of these different top producer groups and my colleagues. But you see a much broader range of price points, of locations between DC, Maryland, Virginia. And also, like I said, Compass is a national company. I know you get a lot of manager calls that deal with the whole country. What has the vibe been for you ending 2024 and kind of going into 2025?
Well, I think one of the important things to realize is when you're looking at an article like this, they're looking nationally. There's really arguably no national real estate market. I mean, real estate is hyper local. We're in one of the strongest real estate markets in the country here in the DMV. And even within the DMV, there are areas where the market is much stronger than in other areas. If you're talking about condos in the district, for instance, in DC, that market is really slow. If you're talking about single family homes inside the Beltway in suburban Maryland or suburban Virginia, that market is still really strong. The luxury market, properties that are priced over $2.5 million is still really strong. So it really depends on where you are. We have seen coming into the spring, one of the benefits, the information that I get to see as a manager is when you all go out and you sign listing agreements, those listing agreements come to me for me to sign after you've already secured them with the client. So I kind of know where we're going based on the volume of agreements that I get to sign. And we've been signing a lot of them. I think that, the market overall in the DC area, I think we're going to have a stronger market in 2025 than we did in 2024. And I think it's going to be driven by a lot of this pent up demand and increased inventory.
Did you see more transactions? I don't know, and I hate to put you on the spot because you may or may not know this, but in 2024, I know home sales nationally are still super low. And they're like 4.1 million or something crazy low. Did you see in our area, the transactions were lower?
Yeah, the number of transactions is down in 2024. About, I want to say the market as a whole is down about 20%. The number of transactions that have occurred. Compass's numbers are better than that. We tend to outperform the market when it comes to those kinds of metrics. So I want to say our number of transactions was actually slightly up, but Compass is a company that's growing. So that doesn't necessarily show you anything about the market as much as it does about Compass's own performance. But we definitely saw fewer transactions in 2024 than in 2023.
And I'm going to get back to the article in a second because the next part is about home prices. But before I do that, after the NAR settlement, did you see that affecting transactions at all, or affecting, like, did anybody get scared off? I didn't. It was confusing, and fortunately, where we are, we always had buyer agents. We had for many, many years, over 20 years, buyer agency. So we were kind of used to it. Just a different way of looking at it. There's a lot of markets across the country didn't even have that, so they were like didn't know what to do with it.
Much longer change for those people.
Yeah, but that being said, it's still confusing. I mean, whether I was dealing with buyers or sellers, kind of explaining how it worked now, and having them hear what's happening in the headlines and the national news and the headlines and some of these YouTube channels, we call them the crash bros. They just spout out these headlines that are just built on things that aren't true, just to be honest. And, just saying that, basically the sky is falling and everything, you don't have to pay realtors anymore and this and that, whatever. I found it took a lot more for you to explain it the way it was really going on because of those headlines. But at the end of the day, it wasn't that complicated. It was just like, this is the way it's done now. And we can ask the seller, and it's just another part of the negotiation, another part of the contract, just like price, just like settlement date, just like every other term. It all worked out. But what did you see a lot of problems happening from it?
No, I think that at Compass, we spent a lot of time and effort making sure that you all were prepared and you had all the information that you had, so that when you went out there and talked to your clients, that you could help them understand what all was going on. I mean, there's isolated anecdotes that you hear about sellers or buyers who decide not to buy because of these changes, but really, at the end of the day, there's not a lot of change. Almost all buyers wind up building a buyer agent commission into their transaction. Most sellers are still proactively offering buyer agent commission. You do see some sellers who will say, that they will offer a buyer agent commission, but they want to have the buyer ask for what that commission is going to be. And it really hasn't, it's gotten to a point now where it's reached kind of an equilibrium, and it's, quite frankly, it's not something that we really think about or deal with on an ongoing basis anymore. So I think that largely it really hasn't disrupted the market.
Yeah. I found, like I said, it's a lot more explaining to, which is fine. I personally don't have a problem with sellers. I tell my sellers waiting to see what the buyer's agent asks, because they have to ask anyway. So why not just wait and see? I know other agents have different philosophies about that. They feel like the seller should automatically say, this is what we're doing. And I get that, that is one way to look at it. It's just, in my experience, if we are going to do it the way it's meant to be, let's do it the way it's meant to be. Let's have it be part of the contract and negotiate like every other term, and, not start off already negotiating against ourselves. That being said, I do advise my sellers to be very open, if they are willing, to offer compensation to the buyer's agent. So that way, at least the buyers know, like, there is an opening. It's not a closed door. It's an open door. It's just a negotiation. That, to me, is the most important thing.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that, and it depends on the market. When you're in a strong market and, you have a competitive seller's market like it is in most of the market here, it makes more sense to maybe wait and see what those agents will ask for, or what those buyers will ask for. And some buyers will decide, just as in any other term to the contract, maybe they'll decide to pay their agent some portion of what the agents agreed to make to help them. And they don't ask the seller to pay for the whole thing. You just don't know what they may be willing to do. If you get into a marketplace where it does take longer to sell houses, it becomes a little bit more of a normal market or a buyer's market, then I think you'll see marketing of what that amount is becoming more prevalent because it becomes a way to attract people to the property. So I think that, we just
Right.
I think ultimately the way the industry is going is that buyers will have to ask.
Yeah.
And that and if, I don't know if any of you watching have ever been involved in a commercial real estate transaction, but when you're involved in a commercial real estate transaction, that's how it works. The buyer or the leaser asks for what their agent they have to pay their agent for the transaction. So it's really not that different than that.
Anissa's Corner says you're planning to sell this summer. Where are you? Tell us where you are. Where are you? Is it a condo? Is it a single family home? How are you feeling about it? Give us some more information and let's talk about it. Yeah, I did. I had a couple of those instances, both on the buy side and the sell side as a listing agent and the buyer's agent, where when I was a listing agent, the buyer's agent asked for something. There's a private sale, so it never went on the market. And my seller wanted to counter on that buyer's agent's commission. She's like, it's never on the market. They didn't have to do anything, blah, blah. And I was like, listen, it's a negotiation. She was still very reasonable. Don't get me wrong. And then on the buy side, I also had part of a strategy saying, we're not going to ask them to pay your whole thing. We're going to ask them to pay half of it. And I'm going to pay half of it because, she wanted. So I've had both of those conversations on either side. And I think it's all part of the negotiation. And as long as you have a real estate agent who's experienced and understands negotiations, and understands how to tell you what it means and different strategies, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, you're in good shape. It's my fear is when you have real estate agents that really don't understand, and then they just kind of throw things out there, and then it gets really messy, and then everybody gets angry and emotions get escalated. And you're in Minnesota. Where in Minnesota? And is it a single family home or a condo? And how are you feeling about it? And do you have any questions? Sorry, she's in Minnesota. So yeah, I think it's really, and you can answer this as a manager. I'm just a person of one, but I think it's more important than ever to really have someone that's experienced on your side that understands negotiation and strategy, because this is another point of negotiation and strategy that can really help a buyer, especially if there are multiple offers, really help a seller, in a buyer's market. Do you know what I'm saying? So both sides, this can be a tool that can make it stand out if you understand it and you understand how to use it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that it's an opportunity for agents who are really skilled to help to differentiate themselves, and I think that it really behooves you as a client to do a little due diligence and make sure that you know that your agent is able to handle the transaction that you're asking them to handle, and that they know the marketplace and that they know the players in the marketplace, because those relationships are more important than ever.
100%.
And even outside of that, when you're talking about a low inventory environment, one of the things that, as you know, Caryn, and being a top agent yourself, good agents go out and find inventory. Yeah. So, a lot of transactions happen because two agents know each other, and one agent has a seller who's looking to sell a property, and one agent has a buyer who's looking to buy a property, and they can put those people together and put a transaction together before that property ever even goes on the market.
My last two listings in December, around the holidays, both private,
right.
both of my sold them both privately. It was kind of crazy. Single family home in Ham Lake. Do we have Compass in Minnesota?
Yes.
Minneapolis
and St. Paul.
I don't know if that's near Minneapolis or St. Paul, but if it is, and you want us to help you find an agent, please fill out. I have a very short form in the link. I'll put a pinned comment, and I'm happy to help you find it. Or if you have any questions for us, ask away. I am going to bring up the article again. I told you I can't see anymore. I'm like, so it's just, and I do this every time, and I try to fake it, and I start squinting, and I start getting a headache, and it's just awful. Okay, home prices are set to rise. Last year saw home prices surge at 4% rate, up from 1.1% in 2023, despite the stubbornly high mortgage rate and a glut of inventory driven by unmotivated buyers and sellers. The median home price in December inched down by 1.8% year over year, arriving at $402,502 after peaking at $406,100 in November. but there is more to those numbers than meets the eye. When the size of the listed properties is taken into account, the average home has increased in asking price per square foot by 1.3% compared with the same in 2023. That signals that the stock of smaller and cheaper homes continues to grow in share. Realtor.com economists expect to see more of the same in the coming months, with home prices projected to go up throughout 2025 at a rate of 3.7%, spurred on by a combination of marginally lower mortgage rates and 11.7% jump in existing for sale inventory compared with last year. I wonder if they're including new construction.
They probably are.
Because it doesn't say resale.
Yeah, one of the things that we deal with when we're looking at data on a national scale is, the Washington, D.C. area is largely improved already. So there's not a lot of open space for housing to be built, tract housing to be built. But elsewhere in the country, there is a lot of space, and new construction is a huge part of their market. Whereas here, it just really isn't, unless you're up towards Frederick in Frederick County or out in Loudoun County or places like that.
Or
so
the
that
new,
is very
yeah,
different. Yeah.
and the new construction we do have is so expensive.
That's right. And then a lot of the new construction we do have, they're tear down spec homes that are built on a one lot. They're not necessarily a subdivision like you see elsewhere in the country.
Yeah, or like the new construction right around the corner from our office in Potomac is like townhomes. I don't even know how they're fitting them in this like parking lot. You guys, it's crazy. It's very upsetting because they're going to all go to my grocery store and take up all the parking spaces because they're still going to drive to the grocery store, even though it's right around the corner. But they're like putting up all these townhomes. They're like starting at 1.5 million or something crazy.
Yeah, and it's what looks to us like an off ramp or a drainage area becomes the housing neighborhood of your dreams.
It's
right. You can dream it. You can do it.
They just keep putting it blows my mind. I would like to see, because I know a lot of people are really been struggling, some more affordable housing. If you're going to build stuff like, when they build these new construction where we are, and it's very expensive, they have to do a very, very small percentage of MPDUs, moderately priced dwelling units, but it's such a small percentage. And then you have to apply for them and you have to have certain qualifications. It's just not easy to get them. And it's just, I just think it's a shame that there's not more.
There's a lot of limitations about what you can do with them once you have them.
Correct.
How long you can own them before you can rent them or you can sell them.
Right. All right. So she goes on to say, we think the downward pressure on price growth due to the supply side effect will slightly win out over the upward pressure on price growth falling mortgage rates next year. It's covering that up. At least compared to the relative balance this year, says Hale. But another factor to keep in mind is there is still not enough homes being constructed in the United States to keep up with the growing demand for housing due to more than a decade of underbuilding, which is bound to drive the price of existing properties up. According to Realtor.com analysis released last February, the market in 2023 was missing up to 7.2 million homes. I know this is a national number, but I feel that, I feel that constriction because
absolutely.
And it's all back to what the article started, the lock-in effect. And I talk about this a lot on my channel because I'm an example of it. I turned an empty nester this year. My youngest went to college in August. And I always thought, I've been here. I did the suburbs things for, 20 years. And my daughter went and my son went, I'm going to move into the city or I'm going to do this or, get rid of the yard. I don't want to mow anymore, all that stuff. That's too cheap for me to stay.
That's right.
I refinanced in 2021 for less than 3%, mortgage rate and for 30 years. And I'm one of those people.
It would cost you just as much to downsize.
Right. And then to go buy something, mind you, there's so much cash out there right now. I know I just went off on a tangent, but the last 4 transactions I've done were cash. There's so much cash out there. I wouldn't have that type of cash though. So then to go buy something and I have to get another mortgage at a much higher rate and prices haven't come down. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I'm in the same situation. We bought our home in 2021 and, for me if I were to, my kids are still young, but if I were to want to get a larger house, the economics of that would be very difficult because, the rate difference would mean that I would be doubling my mortgage payment.
Right.
And that's why there's no inventory out
Right.
there, is because they can't, it just doesn't make sense for them to make any kind of a move down people. It doesn't make sense for them to make a move because they're paying what they were paying for their larger house for something much smaller and not as without as many amenities. So that's a big challenge. And part of what the article goes on to say is as time goes forward, right now, I think it's over 60% of the mortgages that are out there are less than the rate is less than 4%.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. So right now, in the rate right now, the average is right around 6.9, 6.91, 6.92 for what the average 30-year fixed rate is in the country. So, you're talking about a 2% increase, 3% increase.
It's a lot. Plus prices are high.
Plus prices have gone up.
I mean, I know they've gone down from the peak, not gone down since 2019, but they've gone down from the peak in a lot of the oversaturated markets, the markets that kind of exploded during the housing pandemic boom, the Austins, the Boise's, some parts of Florida, basically the Southern Belt, and those prices have gone down since the peak, but they're still higher. And here, I mean, we went up, I think where I am about 30% in 4 years. Are we going to go up 30% this year? No, but I still think they might go up 4 or 5%.
Sure.
Depending on the house. Like you said, some things are softer, like the condos in DC. DC's having some issues.
Right.
I'm going to skip this older rich home buyers are still in charge because really, who cares? Although I am.
And that's a factor.
I am old. I'm not rich.
In the same, you've got a lot of first-time buyers are locked out of the market. So you have a larger percentage of older buyers. The average buyer is much older than they normally are. And that's
it's said the median age of home buyers was 56, up 7 years.
Right.
That's actually a big deal. Up 7 years compared with 2023. The median age of first-time repeat and all buyers each reached record highs. 24% of home buyers last year were first-time buyers, a record low in the data's 44-year history. And the trends favoring older and more deep-pocketed house hunters expected to carry into the new year. It's likely the repeat buyers and older buyers will continue to participate in the housing market as a larger share than younger and first-time buyers in 2025, adds Jones. Still, expensive housing will make it challenging for younger buyers, especially those without the benefit of existing home equity, to break into the market. I was at my appointment today, and we were talking about this actually. Nothing to do with this article, but this guy was telling them, what to expect when we put their house on the market, in a couple of months, and how my last 4 transactions have been cash. And my client says to me, well, where is all this cash coming from? I'm like, I don't know. Because they were all different demographics. One was younger, one was older. I mean, they weren't like all, 75 years old or all, 20 years old and getting money from the parents. They were all over the place. Different price points ranging from $350,000 up to $1.2 million. All of them cash, all in the last 6 weeks. And there's just a lot of cash out there still. And it really makes it very challenging and very difficult for new buyers that need loans to come into the market if they're competing with these cash buyers. Forget about the investors and the institutional investors and all that. I'm just talking about regular people.
Right. It is very hard to compete with that when you're a regular person who is getting a loan, and a lot of people who need FHA loans and things like that, who are low down payment first-time buyers. It's really a challenge. And that's also why you need an experienced person to help you. Yeah,
agree. I have had a lot of success with first-time buyers, fortunately. I think it does, and not about me. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it is possible if you're a first-time buyer. And I think a lot of it does have to do with really having all your ducks in a row and really presenting your offer in the sense that it's very strong and it's going to go to settlement without any complications, and your loans in check, and the communication is there with the seller's agent, the listing agent. Right. This, I think, is interesting. Housing marketing anticipates. I can't speak. Sometimes I mix words up, so bear with me. A Trump bump. With President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration for a second term just around the corner, Realtor.com economists anticipate potentially major shifts to the housing market, running the gamut from an easing of regulations to tax policy changes and even a wholesale recalibration of the supply and demand dynamics. Trump's first term in the White House was marked by tax cuts, deregulation, and adoption of pro-business policies aimed at boosting economic growth. Many of these initiatives could return in a Trump-led 2025, potentially affecting everything from mortgage rates to new construction projects and homeownership affordability, says Hale. But the anticipated Trump bump effect could be tempered by economic factors that are out of a president's control, such as interest rates, inflation, and changing demographic trends. What's more, it remains to be seen whether Trump's raft of campaign proposals to mitigate the crippling housing shortage by making federal land available for home building to boost supply, ease regulations, and tackle inflation would go from mere stump speech promises to actionable policies, and how quickly. Mortgage rates just north of 6% are expected to keep payments essentially static in 2025, despite growing listing prices, but an anticipated higher economic growth under Trump could lead to a bump in incomes. And if effective household tax rates go down, people could see a net increase in their disposable household income. If both income growth and lower taxes If both income growth and lower tax rates come to fruition, we could see homes become somewhat more affordable in 2025 than in the past few years, Hale notes. Other key items on Trump's political agenda, however, have been called into question by economists and housing experts, including his oft-repeated vows to raise tariffs on major trading partners such as China, Canada, and Mexico to rein in immigration. Both tariffs and stricter immigration policies are likely to be acutely felt by the construction industry and would push costs higher, warns Hale. There's so much there. Hi, David. David Manny says, Caryn, when there's a change from one administration to another, is there a little spike in activity in the DC markets? I'm going to answer that, and I want Steve to answer that. In my experience, like I said, I've been back for 19 years. I did grow up here, but I've only been practicing real estate here for the last 19 years. That's several elections. I haven't noticed a change because I think a lot of times people coming in rent, and I don't work in the rental market. So I haven't really noticed a spike in activity. But Steve, you see more than I do. What do you see?
Yeah, I would say largely not. One of the things that we often will see is in an election year, when you get into the back half of the year, the market gets very strange. A lot of buyers will hold off. A lot of sellers will hold off. And typically in an election year, the back half of the year is not very good. And I think we saw that this year. And then once you get past the election, I think it's just, DC is a very political town, and people kind of just freeze. And then once the election's over, the outcome of the election, quite frankly, doesn't matter. It always picks back up again. So I think that you'll find that I think we'll probably have a little bit stronger spring than we would normally have, because of the pent-up demand of people that kind of waited through the whole fall because of the election.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this year, usually I don't actually see any change, but this year last year, it was different, I think, because it was such a weird election. And there was so much anxiety building up to it that people kind of just froze for 3 weeks. And then it happened. And like you said, I don't think it mattered who won. Then all of a sudden people were like, back to normal.
Right.
We're kind of used to
that's right.
Around.
And I was talking to an agent that I know down in DC who does a lot of high-end stuff in DC. So things over $4 million. And he was saying that he has noticed a trend towards a growth in that segment of the market in DC that has been really slow, and he attributes it to wealth moving into the area because of the incoming Trump administration.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that kind of goes along with a little bit of what he was saying in the article there. So that's kind of an interesting thing to see if that will continue.
Okay, Proud Liberal 24. Should I sell my home in Silver Spring, Maryland in May? It's in the $600,000 range. And then he or she goes on to say, my house rents for $3,100 per month in Silver Spring, would sell for $600, keep renting or sell. That is a loaded question. I think that there's a lot of things that we have to talk about. What are you using that income for? What would you use the proceeds for? How much would you buy it for? How much would you make from it? What could you do with that money?
How long ago did you turn it into a rental property? That's a big one.
True, because it's been more than 2 the last 5 years. Steve actually owns a management company as
Mhm.
well, so he knows a lot about the rental market. I know nothing about it, so that's
Mhm.
definitely a good question for him. Because you're asking because of to live there more too than the last 5 years. Is that why you're
Yeah.
saying that?
So when you own
Exactly.
a lot of people who rent properties, they've bought them as their own residence first, and then they'll move out of it. They'll move out of the area, or they'll move on to another house, and they'll rent that property out. One of the things that we always make sure people think about is you really can only rent the property out. Um, yeah. So you've rented it since 2008. Yeah. So you're already to the point where you're going to have to pay capital gains taxes anyway. So I think you kind of have to think. You kind of have to think to yourself about what are you going to do with with those proceeds. Would you roll them into another real estate investment? If you roll them into another real estate investment, you can do what's called a 1031 like kind exchange, where you actually defer the gain on the capital gains on that property and put them into another rental property. If you were to cash those gains out, so let's say you wanted to invest the money in the stock market, you're going to wind up having to pay. You could do a Delaware statutory trust. Yeah. So what a Delaware statutory trust is, basically, it's a trust that owns real estate. You can invest the money into the trust and do that 1031 exchange without having to identify a specific property. So yeah, I mean, it all just depends on whether are you making money on the property? Is it covering your it's paid off.
Utilities?
So
Yeah, it's gotta be
it's
covering
pure cash.
utilities and stuff. Yeah, it sounds like, I
Yeah,
mean, why would you want to sell it just because you're
right,
worried about prices going down? I don't think prices are going to, but it depends where in Silver Spring too. Silver Spring's
right,
massive, as we know. So
right.
depends, but that sounds like a really nice rent, $3,100 a month
Mhm.
for a house in Silver Spring. I think it really depends on what you want. If you want to sell it, we're happy to come look at it and kind of tell you what we think it would sell for. I know you said 600, but we work in the business, so we can come help you out and tell you
Right.
what, what
Yeah.
needs to be done, and you can make a decision from there. Or if you're happy with your tenants and um, making about $25,000 per year after management fees and repairs, it's near Forest Glen Metro Station. That's great. You're near Metro Station. I
Right.
love that area near Forest
Mhm.
Glen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I would, unless you have a pressing idea of what it is you would do with that. I wouldn't rush to separate myself from that. And like Caryn was saying, I don't think that we're going to see prices decline. I think in order to see prices decline, you would have to have an inverse of the supply and demand. Where you had more supply than you did demand. And right now we have more demand than we did supply. And I think barring some kind of a calamity that would totally change the game, like the housing crisis in 2008 or the pandemic in 2020. I don't know that there's going to be anything that's coming on the horizon that's going to that's going to bring your prices down. So I would probably just, that's a lifestyle
Yeah.
decision, in my opinion. Does it create work for you? Are you at a place in your life where it's just something you don't want to deal with anymore? Sounds like you have a management company who does it.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
what 4% a year. What could you do with that money to make more than 4% a year? I think is the way I
right.
would look at it.
Yeah, I agree.
You Um, but like I said, we're happy to come look at it if you want
Sure.
us to. So as far as what we were talking about, Eli, I agree with you. It does sound like a good rental, and it sounds like it's been new roof soon. I mean, it depends how long. If you're going to hold on to it for a long time, that 10,000 amortized over how many years will pay for itself. But if you're thinking about selling it in the next 5 years, and the new roof is going to happen in the next 5 years, well, that should be taken into the equation in deciding whether to sell it or not.
That's right.
It's all about how much money you're going to make, right? And,
Mhm.
and it's, it's not an emotional decision because you've had it since 2008. So it's a financial decision. And it sounds like you know a lot about what's going on with the finances. You know how much you're netting. You know how much your maintenance has been over the last 15 years, right? 15 years?
Mhm.
Doing the math about that well. And what do you want to do? What do you want to do in the future? Do you want to keep being a landlord, or do you want to move on and do something else with that money? if you don't do a like exchange, like Steve said, then you are going to have to pay capital gains on it if you want to change it into something completely different. But yeah, I think it's more of a lifestyle.
And it also depends on where you are in your life, how old you are, whether you have children. A lot of people, if they have real estate and they're trying to not have to pay the capital gains taxes, there a lot of them people will hold on to that real estate until they pass away, and then their children will get a stepped up basis when they go to sell the property, and they won't be necessarily in that same position.
Okay, I know nothing about that,
Mm-hmm.
but there you have it. As far as the article, I have to ask you something. Okay, so Trump said a lot of stuff, and he made a lot of promises.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, if builders had a little bit more leeway, a little bit less regulation, mind you, we don't want to have too deregulated because we want everything to be safe. Maybe they would build more, because I think after 2008, builders really went, I don't want to do this again, and they've been very gun shy since then. And I think that is one of the reasons we have a housing shortage, is because we're just way behind in the building after that. So I think that could help. And as far as the federal land and finding federal land to build on, which, as we know, is usually in places that are not really near anything,
Right.
which is why it's not being used right now. I have an idea. Tell me what you think of it. If there is a way that whoever is designing this, whoever is going to build in this federal land, can also incorporate, may not happen tomorrow, but just tell me what you think of this. If there's a way they can incorporate like driverless cars to drive people from this faraway land to where they need to go to work, or to the gym, or wherever, to the commercial areas, because there's a lot more infrastructure now to be built to do that. And I say driverless because then they could work in their cars, they could watch TV, they could take a nap, so it's not like another burden to have to commute. Then I think it could work out. Do you know what I'm saying? I just think that like the powers that be need to get together and figure out a way to build in this land that is not necessarily conducive to where people are working now, in a way that adds to their lifestyle. So it gives more affordable housing, doesn't take anything away, and gives them but it's got to be a way that their commute is also enjoyable. What do you think?
Right. I think that one of the problems you have is urban sprawl, where people move further and further and further out, and the urban area or suburban area gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I think one of the challenges with his concept of building on this federal land is, like you said, I mean, it is remote. It's not in Rockville. It's hours away from Washington. I think that the challenge is, if we're in a climate where employers are wanting more people to come back into the office, where they're not expanding work from home and flexible schedules and things like that. That's a challenge. So, if we were in a climate where employers were encouraging people to work from home, then I think it would be different. The other side of this is that the cost of building is so high.
I know
that builders really can't afford to build properties that are affordable. Everybody looks at a builder and they think, well, the builder's greedy and they just want to make all this money and all those types of things. The reality is that the margins are very thin, and there's not as much gross profit in new construction as you would think. So it's a challenge. It's not a simple problem that's solved in a simple way.
So he says, I think the dude told me it's a dude. He says the only thing to make homes affordably changing permitting, zoning, planning commissions, et cetera. There's no incentive for builders to build affordable homes because no profits, what you just said.
Right.
And then Maddie B says there are federal lands everywhere. Half of the Western U.S. is federal. Think abandoned air bases near major cities, office buildings, et cetera. Cost of building is high because of overregulation, permitting, zoning, mostly local though. So all of this can be true. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I think
And
that
I think a lot of it depends on where you are in the country. Like you said, when you go out west, you have a lot more open land. Here in the Northeast, in the Mid Atlantic, we don't have that. So we don't have federal lands that are not parkland, and things of that nature. And the cost of building being high, it goes more in. There's more to it than just that. It's also the cost of materials. And that's a huge part of it, and the cost of labor. So, one of the challenges for what he has proposed is that you have to look at what are the fundamental things that would go into bringing the cost of actually constructing a home down. And that's where my concerns come. If you talk about, reducing or increasing the cost of the labor force, that increases the cost of building. Increasing the cost of trucking materials places, that increases the cost of materials for building. So, like I said, there's not one easy solution. It's a really complicated situation. And one of the things that you have going on, that they're talking about it in Montgomery County, Maryland, where we are, is changing the zoning that would essentially do away with the concept of single family zoning. Where you drive down a street in Rockville or Bethesda, you have single family houses, and we have what's called R60 zoning, where the lots are 60 foot long, and that's why you hear R60 zoning. That's what they're talking about. And you can only build one house on one lot, and there can only be one domicile. So if these bills pass, essentially what someone would be able to do is they would be able to tear down their single family home in a residential neighborhood and build 3 townhouses or 4 townhouses or a 4-unit building. And you can't do that. Now you're protected from that by the zoning laws. So, there's positives and negatives to that. On the one hand, you can afford to sell a townhouse on a parcel of land in Bethesda for less than you would a single family home. But the other side of that is, you're fundamentally changing the nature of our neighborhoods, and you're also adding people density to an area that was never designed for it. So, if all of a sudden, let's say you have a neighborhood that has 25 homes in it, and you can tear all those houses down and you can build 75 homes, you've still got roads that are designed for 20 homes. You've
and
got
schools and
designed for 20 homes. You've got police forces and fire response that's designed for lower density. So, that's something.
We're also talking about mixing in like commercial there too, or is it just?
Now they haven't really been the proposals that have been presented in Montgomery County haven't really talked about that. But when you're talking about building housing centers in other areas on federal land, you've got to build all that too. You've got to build grocery stores, you've got to build coffee shops, you've got to build schools, you've got to build all of that around those communities. It's not.
That's why I got my driverless cars.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and technology will help with that. Technology will help with that. Yeah. I think that, as these technologies, it becomes easier for people to do that. But I think that, and this kind of gets outside of housing, but I think that, a lot of employers are on the wrong side of this fight over employees returning to work. Because I think that, if you're trying to find ways to allow people to live in a more cost-effective way, I think not having to commute, not having to live in close proximity to where you work is a big part of that.
So why do you think that why do you think that they're so adamant about people being in the office? I think it's because of the commercial real estate sector is just suffering so much and they're trying to fill in the office buildings, or is it
because
they
have a lot of housing? I think they have a lot of office space that they want to utilize. A lot of companies are locked into leases that they can't easily get out of, and they've got this stuff that's just sitting there. I think that employers feel out of touch with their workforce, and they feel a lack of oversight over their employees when they're not local. And I think that, a lot of this is just a knee-jerk reaction to the shift of where where things were going. After COVID, there was a huge shift towards, and we saw it in our market. We had all kinds of clients that sold their houses in Washington. They moved to Deep Creek Lake, or they moved out to Cambridge on the Eastern Shore, and they moved away because they could. And, now they have to come back because their employers are requiring them to come back to work. So, it's a lot easier to live on an abandoned military base in Arizona if you can work from San Francisco and live on an abandoned military base in Arizona.
Do you think that, you manage a bunch of real estate agents, and I know we're all independent contractors, but did you think in the couple of years, because it wasn't just 2020, it lasted for years, that we were all working from home, doing Zoom meetings and everything. Well, I think the last year people have gotten back in because it's been really encouraged to come back in. Did you see more or less productivity based on whether we were in the office or not?
No, I think that, the productivity doesn't suffer. I think if you look at the actual metrics, I think you'll find that productivity improves. What does suffer is culture. And, and again, we're talking more as an employer now.
Yeah.
But what suffers is culture, and your ability to retain talent is a huge part of that. So, if you don't have an office that people want to be a part of, if you don't have a product, you think about, an employer and your employees as your customers, which you can make an argument in that way. If you don't have a product that they want to consume, meaning they want to come into the office, they feel a camaraderie there, it's much easier for them to leave and go work somewhere else. And I think that's a big part of it too.
I do. I don't know how your wife feels about this, but I can tell you, if both Robert and I worked at home, it wouldn't be good.
Yeah, it's not good.
Somebody needs to work outside the house.
I've always liked working in an office, and Karen, we've always gone into the office. I've always liked working in an office.
No, me, not so much.
Yeah, the camaraderie of it, to me, is just more enjoyable than working at home. But I get a lot more done at home.
Do you? I like both. I like going in for our meetings. I like going for the top producer meetings and having that. But I also can do it on Zoom. Do you know what I'm saying? I still felt connected when we did them on Zoom. But I think for like the family, somebody needs to leave the house.
I agree. Yeah,
and he can be him, and I can stay home. It's fine.
But it's got to be somebody. Yes.
But if everybody's here, like when
everybody's here,
when there's both of, he was actually, because he was an essential worker, so he was always out of the house. But when like both kids were here and I was here and everyone was here, I was like, this is not going to work.
A little tough. You need a bigger house.
No, everyone had their own room. It's just still with a lot of people, a lot of, all the time. All right, I just want to get back to the end of the article, and then we can wrap up. See if because so far I haven't really seen much glimmer of hope, to be honest. I don't know what I think they.
Glimmer of hope is the increased inventory.
I think they oversold their title here. Okay. Market is in holding pattern, but there is good news. Overall, Realtor.com economists expect 2025 to bring slightly lower mortgage rates, coupled with moderate price growth, which means that would-be buyers are not likely to see any dramatic changes in housing costs. Okay. Still, high home prices may keep buyers on the sidelines, waiting for more affordable options, says Jones. The good news is, wait for it, that lower mortgage rates will finally begin eroding the sticky lock-in effect, which should boost inventory, result in more sales. Continued improvement in inventory levels means that buyers may have more options than in the last few years. And there's further cause for optimism in the form of anticipated increase in new construction activity, which should start filling some of the supply gap caused by years of underbuilding. Do you see more inventory coming on in all the listings that you're signing stuff?
Yeah, we always have a big bump in inventory in the spring. But I do think we will have more inventory this spring than we've had in years past, simply because of the pent-up demand. You had a lot of people who just didn't transact anything in the fall and the winter. And I think you'll find that those people will come out to try to want to do something in the spring.
So you think they're just going to be sick, like forget about the interest rates? I'm over.
Yeah, you get to a point where there's a certain amount of fatigue where it's like, I can only live in this house that's too small for so long, and then I'm gonna have to do something. This is not me personally, but just talking the royal me. But and I think a lot of consumers feel that way, and I think that you'll get to a point where they will just say, "Screw it, I'm just going to do it," and they do that.
Especially because if this isn't changing anytime soon.
Right.
It's like you
No,
can
it's
wait
not.
a year, you can wait 2 years, but it's like,
That's right.
I want to, not me. Well, I do
Yeah.
actually want to retire, but it's
Yeah.
not, I have 2 kids in college, not happening anytime soon, but I want to retire. I want to move. I want to go to the beach. I want to move to the country, and if this is not changing in the next 2 to 5 to 10 years, then you might as well just do it.
Yeah.
David says, great question. You would think if productivity is higher, you would think employers would be more behind it. I think that it really comes down to, like we said before, if they the culture, yes, but also, they have to justify paying those expensive rents on the buildings, on their office buildings,
Yeah.
and if they're empty, it's hard to justify that.
Right.
So, I don't know. I know that you said productivity hasn't changed in our business, and maybe it has in other businesses, and we don't
Now,
know
you
that.
look at they do measure the productivity measures across the entire economy, and if anything, it's shown that if anything, productivity improves when people are working off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Regardless of the job.
That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah, but what suffers is culture and retention of talent. So if you figure if you're working in your house and you're on Zoom calls and things like that, it matters less where you work or who you work for. Whereas, if you work for an incredible company that's got a great culture and they've got incredible offices and you're surrounded by people that you love all the time, it's much harder to move. And
Right.
As a manager in the real estate business, one of the big things that we do is try to retain agents. And it's much harder to retain agents when your agents don't come into the office. So that's
right. But there's other reasons why people would choose, just to stick with our business, choose Compass. I mean, I was with another company for 17 and a half years before I switched to Compass a year and a half ago. And it wasn't because of the office building.
Yeah.
That's not why I moved. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So you can still have reasons to switch companies, sticking to ours, and I guess translate to anything other than just the office. I mean, you can have culture still by doing Zoom.
100%. And we were very fortunate that we had the technology that we had when this happened.
Yeah.
Because imagine trying to build culture without teleconferencing.
Right.
I mean, it would be very difficult, if not impossible. We're just really fortunate that we have the technology that we have.
I mean, I still do a lot of my meetings on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Even if people are local, Zoom and DocuSign, it's easier for them. It's easier. Why not make it easier?
That's
right. You don't have to change your clothes. You can be in your pajamas.
Mm-hmm.
All the work gets done. The one thing you can't do is, see houses. I can see them for you. It's not the same. It's like you need to see if you smell anything in the house. You need to
virtual reality.
There's no smell in virtual reality.
No smell. Not yet.
There's no smell-o-vision.
No smell-o-vision.
One day. But I'm telling you, that's the main difference. I tell people when I said, you can buy virtually, I will FaceTime you. I will look at everything. I will take an inspector. I will look at it, put you, zoom in on everything. And I have pretty good eyes. Been doing this 22 years as you have. But that smell is a big deal, and it's like everybody's sense of smell is different. Everyone's sensitivities are different. I'm not allergic to sound.
Part of it too. Right.
Well, sound you can hear on video. You can hear sound. It's not. I'm telling you, smell is the deciding factor.
Yeah.
I had clients that moved from Hong Kong, and one, they bought from Hong Kong. We did the whole thing. It was all during the pandemic. They didn't have a choice anyway, but they bought the whole thing virtually. And then when they moved here, the wife had a very, very strong allergy to smoke and a very sensitivity. And I didn't smell any smoke in it. And the inspector didn't smell any smoke in it. I mean, it's like, but somebody must have smoked in it, or smoked and painted and replaced the carpet. There was smoke somewhere. And, it's just something that, what can you do? I didn't. The inspector, it was, their friends who came to visit it did. It wasn't just me, but she did. So ever since then, that was in 2020, I always tell people, like, we can do everything but that. That is the one thing. I'm not allergic to dogs or cats or anything.
That's right.
Like, if you are, you may feel something that I don't. So there's just, that's just the one, in my opinion, risk that you take when you really do not go see a house in person. Everything else, I think you can pretty much do virtually. You can hear sounds. I can hear sounds. I can tell you what I hear. There's traffic noise. I can put the phone out. I can zoom in on things. I can bring other people, all that stuff. I think you can pretty much tell. A lot of times when I show houses virtually, I will stick my phone out the window and drive the neighborhood with them.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
So there is a lot of stuff you can do, but that's That's something you can't. So it sounds like, to sum up the article, that there's not a lot of hope.
Yeah, I think that the key is going to be interest rates. And I think that the challenge is going to be you got to watch inflation, because if inflation continues to fall, interest rates will fall. If inflation continues to rise, interest rates will stay where they are or continue to rise. And that's really the key. And even the Fed lowering rates, which they've signaled that they don't have as big an appetite to do now as they thought they would, doesn't necessarily lower the mortgage rates, because the mortgage rates are tied to the bond market.
Right.
And really, inflation is what
inflation and the job market.
That's
Those
right.
two things. I agree. And that will tell. And like you said, listen, I started this live stream off of talking about California because it's really bad, and it's just getting worse. Like I think they can't control the fires now. And
Right.
when things like this happen, I mean, they just throw everything kind of out the window, because all this is going to have to be rebuilt, and all these people are going to need to have a place to live. And and I hope that, they can get this under control soon, because it just breaks my heart. I mean, I moved here from California. I have a bunch of friends that are displaced. I have friends whose families are displaced right now, and their homes are gone, and schools are gone, and all this costs money, and all this needs to be rebuilt. And all that, it may be located just in California, but it all, trickles down to other parts of the country and other sectors, because, you have to take people from this and this to help this and this. And I think it's gonna be interesting. I said I did a video at the end of last year talking about home prices projections based on the on the experts' predictions, and then my own predictions. And I do think they're going to pick up. Think things are going to pick up in the spring, which can start as soon as next week here. And where we are right now, it's very cold and snowy, so not so much. But it could change next week. It'd be 60 degrees and sunny.
Let's hope.
Yeah, it was last week, or 2 weeks ago. So I think things will change. I think things will pick up. I think you're right. I think the fatigue will set in, and maybe some people who have low interest rates, like myself, it's not going to be me, but like myself, will start to say, you know what, I'm not going to wait 10 years. So if it's not going to change in the next 5 to years, then I might as well just do it now and bite the bullet, which will create more inventory. I know that listings I have coming up are people that are leaving the area. They're not staying. They're all moving out of the area. So that does not indicative of what I'm talking about. But yeah, I hope that it does, create a little more movement. I hope people that want to buy, have a bunch of buyers coming into town, have stuff to look at. I have seen and I have sold a lot privately. I know we do that a lot in our brokerage, sell privately. So I highly encourage people that are in our area to talk to us about private sales. And if you're outside the DMV, talk to people in your area, because they might be doing that as well, because that's something that's real and it's really happening. I sold a lot privately.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. If you guys are watching this on the replay, please join me live next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have any questions for Steve or myself, once again, Steve's not only a real estate agent, he's also the manager of a bunch of agents, and he owns a management company that does rentals. So any questions to do with rentals or managing or buying or agents, if you're an agent and you want to move to Compass, put it in the comments, put it in the chat. I'm happy to give you his information, or you can always ask me, and we can set something up and talk. Thank you so much. Everybody have a great night. People in California, stay safe.
Stay safe. Happy New Year, everybody.
And Happy New Year. That's right. Happy New Year. Here's to 2025.
Absolutely.